During the summer of 1983, Imagineer Tony Baxter was trying to devise a way to draw guests into the often deserted bear country at Disneyland in Anaheim. The Country Bear Jamboree never achieved quite the same level of popularity at Disneyland that it enjoyed at the Magic Kingdom in Florida, and this remote land was often void of guests. What the area needed was an e-ticket attraction. At the same time, Dick Nunis, then president of Walt Disney Attractions, was pressuring Imagineers to come up with some sort of water ride to help guests stay cool during the hot summer months in Southern California. He argued that, quote, all the other parks have a flume ride, to which Imagineers countered, that's exactly why Disneyland should not. We need to be unique. One day, while making his hour-long drive to work, Tony Baxter was struck with an idea. Why not use the characters from Disney's film Song of the South in some sort of water ride? Brer Fox, Brer Bear, and Brer Rabbit were very well known to the general public, yet the movie had not yet been developed into an attraction like so many of Disney's other films. When he arrived at his office, Tony got together with co-workers Bruce Gordon and John Stone and began brainstorming. After several days of work, the three men came up with a fairly complete concept for an attraction, the Zip-a-Dee River Run. Further development moved swiftly, and soon a model of the attraction and more detailed storyboards were completed. It was time to pitch the concept to newly installed CEO Michael Eisner and President Frank Wells of the Walt Disney Company. Overall, it was an easy sell, but Eisner didn't like the name Zip-a-Dee River Run. He suggested that the Imagineers add a mermaid to the attraction so they could tie it into the recent Disney live-action hit Splash that starred Daryl Hannah and Tom Hanks. Kids, look it up. The Imagineers convinced Eisner that this wasn't a good idea, but he still was insistent that the attraction's name be changed. He just didn't think Zip-a-Dee River Run would appeal to the teenage audience, the target group for the ride. When someone suggested they add the word mountain after Splash, everyone knew they had a hit on their hands. It would be the perfect name, as this would add to the Disneyland mountain range, which already included the Matterhorn, Space Mountain, and Big Thunder. Splash Mountain would mark the first time, believe it or not, that an attraction based on an animated film would ever be built outside of Fantasyland in the Castle Park, something that now seems very common. To that end, it was important that the exterior structure blend in with its surroundings, such as the Haunted Mansion and the remainder of Bear Country. Guests would only be able to see the cartoon world while inside the mountain. In addition, the foundation for the ride was sunk deep into the ground so that the mountain did not tower too high over its neighboring attractions. As well, with so many new animals taking up residence in Bear Country, the land would need to be renamed to Critter Country. It's estimated that the attraction cost $75 million, an extraordinary amount of money for that time. Although a number of new audio animatronics figures were created for Splash Mountain, the vast majority would come from the shuttered America Sings attraction in Tomorrowland. The decision to make use of the audio animatronics for America Sings was an easy one, as many believed a replacement show would be built shortly after Splash Mountain opened. Dave Feighton was brought in to animate and fix story and staging problems. Feighton moved nearly all of the animatronics to new locations and, in the end, removed 10 animatronic figures from the ride completely to improve the show. The quote-unquote official story of the creation of Splash Mountain maintains that the inclusion of the America Sings figures was part of the initial plans. As the story goes, Mark Davis had created characters and designs for Song of the South that were never used in the film. Then, almost 30 years later, they were reborn in his America Sings attraction. Moving the AA figures to the new Splash Mountain would be the perfect fit, as they were already themed appropriately, as Mark Davis was the artist behind both the Brer characters in Song of the South and, as well, these audio animatronic figures for America Sings. However, according to Alice Davis, the wife of Mark, it was the out-of-control budget, not some grand plan, that necessitated the scavenging of one attraction for another. It is interesting to note that the Carousel Theater in Tomorrowland sat empty for 10 years after America Sings closed. It would finally reopen in 1998 as a West Coast version of Epcot's Innoventions. Ground clearing in Bear Country for Splash Mountain began on April 24, 1987. The ride would open over 2 years later on Monday, July 17, 1989. Actor Jim Varney, known popularly as the Ernest character, as well as 12 celebrity children, joined Chairman and Chief Executive Officer Michael Eisner, Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and Mickey Mouse in turning on the water pump to create a big splash. On Tuesday, July 18, 1989, Splash Mountain would officially open to the public. The differences between the Walt Disney World and Disneyland attractions are actually much greater than you might think. The vehicles at Disneyland feature single-file seating where each guest gets a backrest, but usually has their legs crossed into the seat in front of them. The first outdoor scene is not as elaborate and mostly just looks into the park. The lift hills do not have water gushing down them like a waterfall. The Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and Brer Bear animatronics are not as advanced as the Florida counterparts and bear less resemblance to the film characters. Instead of a hopping Brer Rabbit animatronic, in this version of the ride he's pushing a rail car. Brer Rabbit gets trapped in some honey this time around and not in a honeycomb by Brer Fox. The Possum and Rabbit family singing is completely unique to the Disneyland version of the ride. The Turtle sidekick as well is also exclusive. The overall soundtrack, believe it or not, is very different from the other Splash Mountains that were built. Some of the creatures who appear at the Disneyland version that are not at the Magic Kingdom include a donkey, giant cat people, giant wolf people, and giant dog people, of course, all recycled from America Sings. Attendance soared at Disneyland with the addition of Splash Mountain, and soon after its opening, Michael Eisner okayed the construction of a similar attraction for the Magic Kingdom in Florida. At the same time, the Oriental Land Company requested a version for their Tokyo Disneyland park. However, these would not be carbon copies, as I just mentioned, of the Disneyland version. At Tokyo Disneyland, the Imagineers created an entirely new Critter Country land for the park. Here it would be sort of a subland to Western Land, which was their version of Frontierland. This would allow the attraction to fit better in with its surroundings. Although the exterior of this Splash Mountain would be similar to the one in California with its towering Chickapin Hill, the actual track layout would be somewhat different. Also, the loading and unloading of the logs would take place in two different locations, similar to the Haunted Mansion, and these activities would be located inside the mountain. In addition, the logs were re-engineered to create less of a splash due to the harsher winters and cultural differences in Japan. The Tokyo version also contains a 2-story counter-service restaurant deep within the mountain called Grandma Sarah's Kitchen. It also has a beautiful little exterior patio area that looks out at the splashdown of the ride. The Tokyo version of Splash Mountain would open to the public on October 1st, 1992. Of course, we all know that the characters of Splash Mountain were loosely based on those of Song of the South, but most of us don't know the backstory that Imagineers gave this fabled mountain, which is most evident in the Tokyo version. Legend has it that deep in the United States of Georgia live critters that walk and talk in the same manner as human folk. And at the center of this magical land is Chickapin Hill, and it's here that the Beaver Brothers had built their sturdy new dam. But unbeknownst to them, Rackety Raccoon had also constructed a juice-producing still in the same area. And it seems that while Rackety was concocting a new experimental brew, he used a few too many blueberries with disastrous results. When his still exploded, it took the Beaver Brothers dam with it, and water began to rush downhill through the many caves, burrows, holes, and tunnels that crisscrossed the mountain. From that moment on, the local critters started calling the home Splash Mountain, and the name stuck. The Critter Country at Tokyo Disneyland references said characters in Rackety's Raccoon Saloon, just outside the attraction's exit, but also with the Beaver Brothers version of the canoes that guests can row around Tom Sawyer Island. Bringing Splash Mountain to Florida would present other challenges, as it too had no bear or critter country, but in this case, no area to create a new land either. Here, Splash Mountain would need to be part of Frontierland, and the only available location was next to Big Thunder Mountain. This would require relocating the Frontierland train station and using much of the land originally intended for the Western River Expedition attraction, funny enough, a Mark Davis idea. As you can see in this vintage photo, the approach to Thunder Mountain and the railroad station was vastly different than it is today. Another problem the Imagineers faced in Florida was how do you seamlessly blend the American Southwest, represented by Thunder Mountain, with the Old South of Splash. These areas are several thousand miles apart in the real world, and their topography is vastly different. One way to achieve the harmony was through the use of color. Splash Mountain at the Magic Kingdom would use deeper oranges and reds than its California counterpart in an effort to complement the nearby desert terrain. In addition, the newly moved train station would act as a transition between the two attractions as its architecture blends well with both. Splash Mountain at the Magic Kingdom would open to the public 3 years to the day, July 17, 1992, after its California cousin. When it originally opened, guests would enter down a path right off the bridge overlooking the final drop. Once sat in the then lap-barless logs, guests would begin their journey up the mountain much as it existed up until recently. The background music heard in this outdoor queue sets the mood for this bygone era by playing tunes such as Polly Wolly Doodle and Froggy Comes A-Courtin'. These songs are played on era-appropriate instruments like the harmonica, the banjo, and the mouth harp, all of which were popular in the 19th century. Much of the outdoor queue winds through a wooded area inhabited by many of the local critters. A number of their homes can be seen as you wander about. The entrance to Splash is through an old barn used by the Critters. Tacked onto the door is the front page of the Critters' local newspaper, The Rabbit Tales, sounding a warning. Many farm implements can be found inside the barn, but it's obvious that the main purpose of this structure is to grind wheat and grain into flour. Also, once inside, the music changes to the tunes heard in Song of the South, the film. In Tall Tale Tunnel, we discover clues about the adventure we're about to experience. Here we see several wise messages and portraits of some of the characters we're about to meet. This is also where we're introduced to Brer Frog, with his shadow projected against the wall of his home, spinning yarns about Brer Rabbit. The main transportation in and around Splash Mountain is via logs hollowed out by sharp-toothed beavers we assume to be the Beaver Brothers. Our journey begins as we leave the loading dock and make a sudden right turn and begin our climb up a sharp incline. At the top of the first incline, we sail past the briar patch as well as logs falling through it, and then proceed on to the log lifter. The log lifter is an ingenious device created by the Beaver Brothers to haul logs to the top of Chickapin Hill. It's also near the entrance to the log lifter that you often find your best opportunity to get drenched by infamous water cannons that would fire every time a log would splash into the briar patch. At the top of the next incline, we find a number of indications that critters inhabit the mountain. First, we happen upon a wagon that is selling critter elixir. This potent brew guarantees to cure fleas, flat feet, and fur balls. Next is a small garden with carrots, turnips, lettuce, and cabbage, all ripe for the picking. Also dotting the landscape are numerous critter homes. And around the next bend, we discover the home of Brer Rabbit and as well Brer Bear, and just beyond that, Slippin' Falls. It's here that our log takes a sudden dip and enters the interior of Splash Mountain, and we come face to face with the critters themselves. Inside the cave, we're greeted by a number of geese and frogs, welcoming us to their home with a lively rendition of How Do You Do. Disney legend Thurl Ravenscroft, who voices characters in The Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean, among many, many other credits, lends his voice to one of the frogs. Once under the bridge, we encounter the devious Brer Fox and Brer Bear for the first time. As we travel deeper into Splash Mountain, we come across Brer Raccoon and Brer Porcupine. They, along with the baby bunny twins, try to warn Brer Rabbit and us that it might be time to be turning around.
Look yonder. There goes Brer Rabbit. Being chased by Brer Fox.
In the distant background, we see Brer Fox and Brer Bear chasing after Brer Rabbit and a projection on the wall. In an effort to snare Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox sets a trap, but the dim-witted Brer Bear stumbles into it and is caught instead. Safe on the other side of the river, Brer Rabbit laughs and hops away to his laughing place, thanks to, at the time, one of the most sophisticated audio animatronic figures ever built. We run into Brer Frog again, enjoying the old swimming hole with his friend Brer Gator. Beyond their fishing spot are a number of critters' homes, and we can hear several of the inhabitants singing about Brer Rabbit's laughing place. Brer Rabbit has painted a sign saying "To the Laughing Place" on an old tree branch. Believing what he reads, Brer Bear plunges his head first into an opening and stirs up a hive of bees. Moments later, a loud crack can be heard as the rotting tree trunk gives way, and we all fall into the laughing place on the ride's darkest and second largest drop. Further on, we find Brer Bear has landed on his back with a beehive stuck on his nose. Brer Rabbit is also on his back, but he is laughing hysterically. He says to Brer Bear, "I didn't say this was your laughing place. I said it was mine." But unbeknownst to Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox has snuck up behind him with a beehive honey trap surprise of his own that he swings around haphazardly. The laughing place turns out to be a flooded mine that is enjoyed by a number of critters, and we pass into that after dropping under the Walt Disney World Railroad track, which is hidden in the darkness. As we pass through this area, we see several of his friends having a rollicking good time. Turtles are being lifted by streams of water, and possums are popping out of holes. The last possum that pops up in the ceiling actually says FSU, an in-joke added by an Imagineer who attended the university. Further into the cave, we discover that Brer Fox has finally succeeded in capturing Brer Rabbit. He has encased the frightened rabbit in the beehive from earlier. As we start to ascend out of the cave, two buzzards pontificate on the sad fate of both Brer Rabbit and ourselves, and along the rocky walls, strange eyes peer out of the darkness. Near the top of the shaft, we find Brer Fox's lair and Brer Rabbit tied to a spit, waiting to be roasted. In the background, we hear Brer Fox taunting him with a variety of threats, and we see a projection of his shadow on the wall. But the quick-thinking Brer Rabbit responds, "That's okay, Brer Fox, hang me if you gotta, but please, please don't fling me into that briar patch." Once again, the feeble-minded Brer Bear doesn't realize that he's being tricked and does just that. He tosses Brer Rabbit into the briar patch and the safety of his home. And of course, all of us in the log are forgotten about and allowed to fall right through the cave of thorns. Realizing the error of his ways, Brer Rabbit decided that home is the best place to be, and his friends all welcome him back with a rousing rendition of Zippity-Doo-Dah. This musical portion has alligators playing banjos and singing, as well as a riverboat full of critters singing and dancing and playing music. Brer Bear becomes entangled in the briar patch looking for Brer Rabbit, and while Brer Fox tries to free him from the thorns, Brer Gator has latched onto his tail. In the last scene, we find Brer Rabbit comfortably back at his house with his friend Mr. Bluebird, and the two of them sing of their good fortune and the lessons learned. As we travel back to the load station, we notice that the sides of some of the buildings have had the lyrics from Zippity-Doo-Dah painted on them. It's the truth, it's actual, everything is satisfactual. If you look closely, you'll see some stacked crates next to the first mural. The ride also featured Disney World's first on-ride souvenir photo you could purchase, which in addition to that viewing area at the end of the ride, would also be displayed on a TV in this crate near the unload. The top crate was used to feature that photo preview. The problem is that the photo preview never actually previewed your photo when you were there, so it was boarded up and removed. The attraction exits into Splashdown Photos, where guests can pick up their on-ride photos, and as well as some Splash Mountain merchandise. There was also the Briar Patch shop that was towards the ride's main entrance. The plunge down Chickapin Hill is 52.5 feet long on a 45-degree incline. Guests descend at a speed of approximately 40 miles per hour. The ride was approximately 11 minutes in duration, considerably longer than many rides Disney had built since 1992. Riders also needed to be 40 inches tall to take the plunge. Fast Pass was added to Splash Mountain at Walt Disney World in 1999, with the Fast Pass kiosk placed directly underneath the Frontierland train station. In December of 2002, a new signage package was installed to better lead guests to the correct destination. Especially in the evenings, it was very hard to find the standby line, the Fast Pass line, Fast Pass distribution, and the entrance to the Walt Disney World Railroad. These are the signs that you saw up until the attraction's closure in 2023. In 2002, the ride seating at Disneyland was modified. Instead of the original 7-seater logs, which required some people sitting between the legs of the person behind them, now each person had their own backrest. The only drawback was that each log could now only seat 5. In 2005, the Disneyland ride received a refurbishment for the 50th anniversary of the park. In addition to a general refresh of paint and audio animatronics, the ride seating was modified once again. Each log can now seat 6 passengers with a modified seat in the back to accommodate wider guests. Splash Mountain at the Magic Kingdom would regularly undergo January refurbishments over the years, and during a refurbishment taking place from January 4th to February 15, 2008, a third load platform was added. The refurbishment from January 3rd to February 27, 2010 brought the biggest upgrades to date to the attraction. The front and back portions of every log were replaced, the entire mountain was repainted, all the animatronic cast was back in perfect working condition, and the new indoor lighting made it look like you were actually outside. It was rumored at the time that logs with lap bars would be added, but it didn't happen. However, the logs were spotted backstage. In January 2011, Splash Mountain at the Magic Kingdom finally did receive those lap bars for its ride vehicles. Each row of 2 to 3 passengers would share one lap bar. Meanwhile, Tokyo Disneyland would receive individual lap bars, which made the height requirement 5 inches shorter than the other 2 versions. In 2018, both the Magic Kingdom and Disneyland attractions received a sponsorship from Ziploc Bags. The company created custom plastic bags to protect belongings for guests while riding the attraction. When the closure of Splash Mountain was announced, the sponsorship was abruptly ended, and Ziploc moved their sponsorship to the Jungle Cruise at both Disneyland and the Magic Kingdom. Other versions of Splash Mountain were planned, but ultimately never built. A version of the popular attraction was planned for Disneyland Paris, but was scrapped due to budget reasons and as well the cold weather in Europe. The attraction was never even discussed for Hong Kong Disneyland, but the absence of Frontierland was a big reason. The addition of a Grizzly Gulch area with a large water play area probably meant they would never build the attraction there. In June of 2020, it was announced that the Disneyland and Magic Kingdom attractions would be rethemed based on the 2009 Disney animated film, The Princess and the Frog. Disney stated that the development of the project actually began in 2019, prior to the online petitions that were circulated during the George Floyd protests. The New York Times reported that Disney executives had actually privately discussed removing the attraction's Song of the South theme for at least 5 years before putting into development a theme based on The Princess and the Frog. However, all of this has been argued given how long the development time took to actually make the new ride a reality. The current project is led by Walt Disney Imagineer senior creative producer Sharita Carter, with Tony Baxter returning as a creative advisor. A spokeswoman said that there are no plans to redesign the attraction at Tokyo Disneyland, although rumor is that the Walt Disney Company would really like them to. In August of 2021, Vice President of the Magic Kingdom Melissa Valaquette stated that due to the slow process of redesigning the ride, it was going to be a little bit of time to reimagine Splash Mountain. During that month, new artwork and details for the retheme were revealed. In July 2022, during the Essence Festival in New Orleans, it was announced that the new ride, called Tiana's Bayou Adventure, would open at both parks in late 2024. In December of 2022, new artwork was unveiled, and it was announced that the Magic Kingdom version of the ride would have its last day of operation on January 22, 2023. Meanwhile, in Japan, from July 1st to August 31st, 2022, Splash Mountain was actually updated and given a seasonal overlay called Splash Mountain Get Wet Max. During this overlay, guests get more soaked than usual to get relief from the extremely hot and humid Tokyo summers, which, believe it or not, from personal experience I will tell you, is more humid than Orlando. The closing of Splash Mountain at the Magic Kingdom was quite the event, with the attraction having up to a 220-minute wait at times. Towards the end of the night, a large crowd gathered at the splashdown area of the ride and cheered for every single log as it arrived at the end of the attraction. The crowd even at one point broke into a sing-along of Zippity Doo Dah. While the content of the attraction is mired in controversy due to its connection to Song of the South, there's no denying that Splash Mountain will leave an indelible mark on pop culture. Similar to Space Mountain, It's a Small World, Pirates of the Caribbean, or The Haunted Mansion, the Splash Mountain name is a household term, a ride likely even familiar, at least in basic concept, to those who have never even been to a Disney theme park. It would be narrow-minded to deride the ride as dated, overhyped, or even only as good as the thrills achieved on its several drops. The audio animatronics of the Florida and Tokyo version of the ride were among the best ever built, and when properly maintained, they are good, if not even better in quality, than several of Disney's most recent figures on modern-day attractions, such as Rise of the Resistance or even Avengers Assemble Flight Force. The show scenes of Splash Mountain are undeniably impressive and charming, while the soundtrack is one of the most memorable ever created for a theme park ride. As has been said before, two things can be true. It may very well be time for Disney fans around the world to say goodbye to Splash Mountain, and it can also be one of the greatest attractions ever built. The march of time and change in cultural sensibilities should not erase the work of many artisans who created such a beloved and popular ride. The Disney fandom as a whole remains hopeful for the future and hopes that the bones of the ride can present a canvas on which the next great Disney attraction can be painted. Here's hoping that everyone involved in Tiana's Bayou Adventure can create something either as endearing or perhaps even more so than the beloved Splash Mountain.